And it's Gordo here on behalf of Legion TCG, and we're back for some more Digimon TCG content. Today we're here back with a deck profile. This is something I've been working on for a long time, back in BT8, and obviously we've had new releases to go with it. I've done a profile before, but this is my final version for this set, so I kind of wanted to share it with you all. If you do like the content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications so you know when this content goes live for you. But let's get into it. And to start off here, we've got the Gaiomon. The reason I went for this one over the Draw Power Gaiomon is because I feel like the 1k buff with how I play the deck for myself personally allows me to control that board a little bit better. Because there has been those scenarios where it's just I'm missing that one extra buff. It could be a D-Reap matchup, could be various different things, but it has come up more times than none. Our next Digi-Egg is the Gaiomon from BT5, with this beautiful artwork that goes to it, but allows you to draw on swing if you're swinging with a Greymon. So just this lives a bit cycle power. It's just that additional egg because some of our games can go a little bit longer than we'd like them to. So the fifth egg is really needed. And then moving on from the Digitomers, we're going into the rookies. So I'll go through this lineup pretty briefly because you've probably seen them 100 times by now. But we do run the BT5 Searcher Ragu, which allows you to reveal 3, add an Omni or a Greymon to hand. We run 4 of those. We run 4 of the Argu X. More cycle power, more draw. You can have a hard play it so you get a draw, so revealing potentially add a card, or you can digivolve on top of the Argu to get even more draw. So if you get the 3 memory, go Argu, do 3 search, go Argu X for nothing, do another search, as well as get the draw as well to go with it. If you have a cool ball, it's another draw, so you can potentially cycle a hell of a lot of cards just by those 2 alone. And the other rookies we do run 4 of the promo Argu. Allow us to give a 2k buff to any Greymon, so it just allows us to control the board by having that buff there available. I like this one over the Start Ragu that gives you 2k and swinging into security, because half the time I'm swinging at bodies, and that 2k is then null and voided for me. And then finally we run a 1 of Argu, which gives 1000 buff from the original red starter deck. It's just there as a 1 of. It could be cut out, but it's done well for me just to have the rookie count a bit higher up. Moving on from the rookies, then we're up to the champion level. We run a total of 11 champions in this deck. So I'll go through them briefly for you, but we do start off with 4 of the Greymon blocker. This can come up in many matches like Armor Rush. Generally any match it can come up in, because having that additional blocker there in a meta that doesn't predominantly have a mass amount of them can stop just the added poke where needed. Following from that one, our next in line is the Greymon X Anti. One of the reasons I like the blocker at 4 of is if you go the blocker and then go Greymon X Anti, you technically have a blocker then at 6k, so you can have a level 4 blocker quite easily instead. But the Greymon X Anti is really there for its protection clauses, stops being bounced and deletion. It's a mandatory thing in this deck. You need it. It's one of the biggest selling points for this deck and why it makes it such a strong contender for things. Because all the kind of thick red options like Gaia Forces and that are irrelevant, because you can pop them, you can detach to then stop being destroyed, Coitus Breath, things like that. So it stops a lot of potential removal of your board and allows you to continue pushing through. Following from that, we run 2 of the Security Greymon. Getting the additional security check can come up in some matchups because this is an OTK meta. You do need to keep the pressure on somewhat, but I don't feel it's valid at 4, so I think 2 is enough. And then finally, just have an alternative win con, we do run a 1 of a Goonie. Has come up with multiple times. It's just like having a Blitz Omni for a game, but as a Goonie, and it's just handy to have there. So we run 11 of those in total. Moving on to the Ultimates. So Ultimate wise, we run a total of 8. To no surprise, the main one is the BT8 Metal Greymon. It's just for this deck, because it plays control and aggression at the same time, being able to have the choice to attack unsuspended Digimon, as well as being able to de-digivolve when digivolving into it, just gives you that good element of control, whereas you can choke them to 1, let's say you have a tie down, use the de-digivolve, you put them 1, you've potentially taken out their body, or you've interfered with their stack somewhat to put you in a better position, and to set you up for next turn. Sometimes I will just Evo Impact with this just to keep it safe, because I want to have the option there for when I do raise out to start swinging into their bodies. After this, we go into 3 of the Metal Grey X Antibody. The X Antibody there is just this really strong card, being able to give you a 3k buff which you retain until the end of your opponent's turn, and the additional security check can allow you to pressure with an OTK quite nicely. And that 3k buff can cause so much issues, because if you pair that with a Gaiomon, it makes it 16k. So if you are against the yellow matchup, Wyvern's Breast just misses. And with another tech in here, it stops another thing from being announced to it, so you can potentially keep your stack on board. And then finally we run a one of Alterus. I was back and forth with the X antibody and the Alterus. I decided to put one in because sometimes you don't always get the correct anti, and the protection clause is so important in this deck. And memory stoppers can be a pain because things memory boosts that are part of the deck, so being able to potentially pop them is handy, or even just pop a level 4 or something like that, because there is things like Armor Rush still, there is things like Imperial still in the meta, so it can come up. Now moving on to our megas here, so we run a total of 6 megas in this deck. Well, technically it's 8 if you want to include level 7s as well, but overall we start off with the main part of the deck, which is 3 Gaiomon. Gaiomon is just generally a very, very good card. I can't say a bad word about it. Yes, it's a 5 cost, but that 5 cost is definitely worth it in all situations. It can change the tempo of a game, it can change your opponent's board state, it can change your opponent's security level as well, just by how many different things are applicable to it. So first of all, it's a keyword sponge. It's basically a level 6 Ragnar with its security attack +1 and reboot. You can Digivolve for 2 from Blackwater Greymon, so it's an X anti-form, which means Cool Boy does get procced if you go on top of a Blackwater Greymon. And then when Digivolving, if you have red or black in its source, so if you have black in source, you can Digivolve something, and if you have red in source, you gain Blitz. So not only you are then Digivolving one of their Digimon, which there's nothing in this point in the game which then stops that, bar them hard playing something. So you get to lower down the stack, so if it's too big a body, you take it down by 1 and then you can swing over the top of it. Or you can just Digivolve it to a point where there has been a circumstance, whereas like I played against Alpha, they detached everything bar the egg under their level 7, and I Digivolved it and got deleted and just swung it to security. So, there are circumstances where it can ultimately change the board and the outcome of a game. So it's a very strong card. It's 13k as well. Moving on to our second level 6, I only run 2 of this one. I was originally running a 3-3, but I had made space for another tech which was needed for a few matchups. But Black War Grey is still a very strong card. There are decks that still heavily rely on tamers. There are things like Yellow Blue Control that have come out now. Even Grandis relies on tamers to some extent because they need to have something that puts them back to 3. If they don't have a boost there, they've got a Mimi there, that's them being reset to 3. You can potentially choke decks like that. So Black War Grey is just very good. And if you manage to go into it, it's like if you go Metal Grey in Raisin, go X Anti, then you're able to retain turn and go to Black War Grey. You can then just go ahead and swing over one of their Digimon, unsuspend, then go into Gaiomon for 2 to then swing in security. So you can control with Black War Grey and then go straight from Gaiomon to go for some aggression if needed. So it's just a very strong and versatile card. I'd run more of it if I had the space to, but it's just a tight deck now that's just trying to refine things with it all. The one that I run at level 6 is the Delicate Plan War Grey 1.0. The card, I was umming and ahhing about playing it for a good while because I didn't like the idea of just having this red Digimon that Gaiomon can't go into. I played a 3-3. But then matchups like Security Control kept coming up, and then things like Blue-Yellow Security Control, because that's basically what it is, and various different things, Mastimon, Ophania Turbo, all these things had hefty security bombs. And whereas the Grey Anti and the Alterus can stop deletions and bounces, there are still things like Chaos Degrade. There are things that can get around it, things that can interrupt it, the things like Ultimate Flare, things that interrupt the stack and potentially can put you out of the game. So I put this in as a one-of purely because in those matchups there, that you tend to get a bit more time to build up to the ideal stack. So what I'll do is I'll often just control the board with a Black War Grey or Gaiomon, keep this in hand once I've searched it out enough, hold onto a Blitz Omni, and get it to a point of whereas I'm going to do 5 checks with this War Grey, which is easy to do because you just get the Security Greymon, Metal Grey X Anti, War Grey here gets extra buff. So then there's 4 checks, and then if you have a tie down, there's 5 checks. Then obviously if you go into the Blitz Omni, you're still going to retain the all the checks you would have from the War Grey as well. So it's just a lot of pressure, and a lot of decks that can't come back from that. So run that as a one-off. Now next is our level 7 slots. Now this spot here is It's very flexible. It's completely down to your play style and what you think you need in your kind of meta, to be honest. I run 2 level 7s and I've been back and forth with 2 choices time and time again. I run 1 Blitz Omni. Blitz for game is just like a Goonie. You know, you should added win con, and in this kind of deck you kind of need it just to get additional swings sometimes. Its protection clause doesn't really come that often because you've probably got the Rex Anti and Alterus in there, but it is an additional one if needed. And if you've gone into Black War Grey into Gaia, you've got 2 protection clauses in there, so it's still quite good. The other one I run in it as a one of is the Omni X Anti. Now, the reason I've been back and forth is I was running 2 Blitz for a long time because I kept finding security control matchups and long games. My Blitz was in security, or I'd used it early, and I didn't have a last win card, so that's why I've gone to put the Aguni in as well as the Blitz as well. But the Omni X Anti, I haven't really found many matchups that it comes in clutch for outside of Grandis. It's really there for that matchup, because Grandis is probably one of the worst matchups for this deck, because if it high rolls it can't keep up with the pace. But if you get into Omni X Anti, there's not a lot they can do. But it's trying to find that piece, so that's why I'm 50-50 with it, because I can't consider any of the matchups where it's been invaluable to me, where it's won me games or stalled out enough. So it's one of those I could potentially cut down to either make space for a second Blitz or an alternative option card. Finally, moving to the last part of the deck profile, it's the options and tamers. I'll make this part brief because there isn't a lot of diversity in majority of these things. Actually, tell a lie, there is slightly. So I've seen lists that run Nokias, that run Cool Boys, run Ties, run Heroes. There's a lot of different playstyles and choices that people decide to make. But I found this is where best me time and time again. So I do run 2 Tie and run 4 Cool Boy. Now the reason for the 2 Tie is because I did originally play this with no memory tamers for a bit, because I saw a list that did trial it, so I wanted to give it a go myself, and it actually played off really well. Whereas the point of the Cool Boys were supplementing that requirement for the memory tamer. But there were scenarios whereas if I was playing the mirror set, let's say for Black War Grey, Cool Boys would get popped and I'd have no potential win, no way of building back up. I'd have no memory. I'd be constantly choked. I'd lose all momentum. So I feel like 2 Ties was the good response to that, just to keep the deck at 3, or at least make it so they have to either choose all the Cool Boys or a Cool Boy in a tie. So 2 Ties has worked wonders for me. The reason I went Tie over Hero is purely because I don't think you need a 2k buff, because you run the Metal Grey X Anti and I run the Coromon 1k buff. That's normally enough, and there's the promo Argu, so there's 3k plus the 3k for the X Anti, so that's potential for 6k. So I feel like 2k from Hero is irrelevant at this point, and the additional security check can really make a dent in the security, especially if you pair it off with the security Greymon, and then the BT1 or Greymon as well. The other tamer we went with was obviously was the 4 Cool Boy. Now I've changed this ratio. I did originally try Nokias in this deck, and I just haven't found the same value for Nokia as I did previously. Nokia's great if you have an Argu, you throw out a searcher, it gets you more than likely gets you a card back, but you just supplemented the card that was already in your hand. So you get 2 cards on board, and in response you get a card back from your deck to potentially make your hand better, make your hand worse. It can vary. But one of the factors why I think Nokia and things plays like that aren't as good anymore is things like Death Exmon. If I use a Nokia, let's say if I hit Nokia from security like 2-3 times from security, I'm going to get, potentially if I have 3 Argus in hand, I'm going to play out 6 cards. Death Exmon then becomes negligible cost, to the point of it'll ruin my board and just be sat there and be a timer, which I have to then deal with, which means I can't build up on board. I have to build up back in Raisin. That's just one reason, but I just generally haven't found it's valid enough, because Nokia's only live on board. Obviously I know Cool Boy is, but that's what one of my playstyles is, to adapt to along the lines of actually leave myself, let's say at level 5 the Metal Grey BT8, not go into the X Anti, just leave the threat there. Or even if I'm at level 4 and I have got the level 5 in hand, but I've got the Greymon X Anti, I will leave myself at the level 4 without the X Anti, raise up, get the procs from that, then go into my BT8 Metal Grey to DD or something, choke them, or even be able to go up into my next my Metal Grey Exanti to then swing at security for a few checks, and then go Black War Grey or Gaiomon, whichever is more applicable. So there are ways around using it to your own advantage. So the 4 Cool Boys have been invaluable over things like Nokia for me, which is sad because I do quite like the Nokia mechanic, but I just don't see it as a thing anymore. I don't think it has a good enough place. I don't even think it has a place in the Black Gaiomon version as well. But that's just possibly just my take. So that's the tamer count. We run 6 tamers in total, 2 ties and 4 Cool Boys. And then options, last but not least, we run 2 red memory boost. Memory boosts are just like fundamental in every deck this set. Everybody's using them to get their surge stuff or even just to gain the memory. One of the other reasons I like the BT1 War Grey is because it stops your opponent just getting a random memory boost put down into their battle area, because that's cost me so many games. Just the fact that I've swung recklessly, I've tried to choke them to 1, but my swing, because I went Gaiomon and then went to swing, has been a case of I've hit a memory boost or I've hit 2 memory boosts, and then that means they're going to start on 5 because I have no memory and no way to block memory because of the red base. So it has come up quite a lot. So 2 red memory boosts for us, just to extend our turns, search those pieces. And then finally, last but not least, I've looked at the alternatives. I've tried the alternatives, and I stand by this card. 2 Congo. I know there's Breath of the Gods, which obviously says stop any attacks going into security, and that's basically it. There's no more further attacks, but sometimes that isn't enough, because if I see in hand, yes, I can stop my DP being reduced, which is good, and that's obviously one thing I try and play around by using the Gaiomon and the Metal Grey Exanti to make myself 16k, so they can't just Wyvern's Breath me. But sometimes you just have to take that hit. But Congos come up more often because of the fact it stops your opponent being able to recover. So in the security control matchups, it's invaluable. In the Mastimon matchups, anybody uses Chaos Degradation. There's loads of different ways where this comes up as being able to stall out more matchups than Breath of the Gods. Because Breath of the Gods, I feel like, is the best place for it is in security, but it never seems to turn up there. And the reboot in this deck, I generally have it with Gaiomon, so it's irrelevant to me. It's just the DP reduction, which can be nice, but I don't always have the time to do that. But if I can slow them from actually being able to attack me, because this also filters into some of those matchups. Let's say they go Grandis, you Congo, they've got another rookie on board to the side of it, which means they'll swing with Grandis, unsuspend, swing, but they can't swing with the rookie for game. Or you play against D-Brigade, Dark Knightmon, any different kind of load to the ground deck, you can stall out from them being able to get multiple checks in at you. Armor Rush is another one, because the Magnamon is a 7 cost. Obviously, Magmon X is slightly more, but the Magmon is a 7 cost, so when they go Vmon, they can't swing because the Congo. They go into the Magnar, they can't swing because of Congo. So I generally feel like this card puts in a lot of work overall. And there we have it. As you can see on the screen now is the deck list we've just been through there, for those that you have jumped ahead to this point. Generally, this is my most refined Gaiomon list. I've tested this throughout the entirety of BT9, some of it prior to BT9. I did test it with BT8 Black War Grey. During that time, even when it wasn't a top tier deck, I find that it's got a very high ceiling to it when it wants to. But the great thing about the deck overall is I feel like the deck is it's not for beginners. I feel like it's a very reactive deck. So whereas most decks are quite prominent, they just want to go OTK and swing. This deck is there to respond. So if your opponent plays out Tamers, you deny them Tamers. If they play out Bodies, you deny them Bodies. If they're not playing anything, you take their security. You are playing into what your opponent's lacking in or what they're trying to build up in. For instance, if you go against a security control deck, let's say they're yellow-purple, for instance, they'll always have like a yellow egg or a purple egg, vice versa, and they'll always throw down a Tamer with the opposite colour. So targeting those to eliminate those options from their hands can be detrimental to them, because they're only going to run a certain amount of them before they run out. I'm not saying you can get through all of them, because obviously the list here isn't fundamentally built to do that time and time again, but you can interrupt it enough to do what you need to do. And then you've got things like the Congo and that to stop them from recovering from security, putting your stuff in there in your own securities, things like that, because there's a very different amount of matchups this deck plays into and can be considered as a bad matchup for others. The only one I know unequivocally is a bad matchup is Grandis, and really that's like for every deck. If that deck high rolls, it's just a very strong deck. But overall in this meta, I don't really think there's any decks that I would say this deck dramatically struggles with. I'm not saying it can win every matchup, that's definitely not it, but it can play well into near enough all matchups, and some of them can be a 50-50, 60-40. There's variations with it, and it all depends on how you pilot the deck, and that's what I like about it. It's not just the deck itself, it's how the pilot works. So you bring your own skill into this deck, and that's something I've found and enjoyed in it from the very start. And there we have it. That is my Gaiomon profile. Thanks everyone for tuning in to Legion TCG. If you do like the content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications so you know when this great content goes live to you. This was more of a guide today than a deck profile, something new we are trialing. If you do like this style of deck profile, just let us know in the comments down below. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time at Legion TCG.